That's in the shot?
No, not now. It will be.
Okay. I can't see myself yet.
Well,
No, yeah, people are in. Don't worry about it.
Well, we're not showing them.
Recording in progress.
Could he show me?
I don't think so. That would say. Yeah. Are you good with this setup? Or are you gonna put the little mic here on the?
And then how do you want to be notified?
On the talk.
Oh, thank you. Sure.
Can you make me a code so I can?
Oh, shoot. Where was
Did you notice the blue shirt this time?
that was great. Sorry, Grace.
What's the date?
22nd. 22.
Checking to make sure it works.
Oh, we'll check that.
Oh, of course you did.
Do you have your phone? Oh, a couple times.
Yeah, but I turned it off right away. All right.
Hi, thank you for joining us. My name is Bethany McCorkle. I'm the Communication Director for Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost. We have election integrity information from a handful of cases, so we're going to get right to it and let Dave Yost give you the update. Thanks.
Thank you, Bethany. My name is Dave Yost. I'm the Ohio Attorney General. In August of this year, the Secretary of State, Frank LaRose, sent 597 referrals to this office involving election integrity. Of these, 138 were cases where someone had voted improperly. The remaining lion's share of the cases were matters involving improper registration. I'm going to go through a number of things that relate to the law. I hope you'll bear with me. I'll try to explain it as I go along, but there's a lot of moving pieces here. The distinction between improper voting and improper registration is important because this office has the authority to prosecute improper voting cases if the local county prosecutor does not move forward on a case that's referred by the Secretary of State. We also have the authority to investigate cases that are referred to us, but we do not have the authority to prosecute registration cases. So the bulk of the cases that were referred to us in August and then a few more in September are not within this office's authority to bring a criminal prosecution, even if we might think it was warranted. We had 653 total voters between the August submission and the September submission. As you can see, the September submission was largely duplicative of the first one in August. We had 138 voters. 121 of those had never been seen by the Bureau of Criminal Investigation in my office. There had been no investigation done by our office, meaning we had to begin from ground zero on all of those cases. Now, I'd like to switch for a moment before I get into the actual actions today, because there's an important matter to understand legally. And that's the question of intent. So in Ohio, there is a descending level of intent for a crime. At the top, we have purpose. Then we have knowingly. Then we have recklessly. Then we have negligently. Then we have, at the bottom here, strict liability. Liability. So let me explain this to you. These are descending levels. So purpose means I did that and I intended to do exactly what happened. Knowingly means that I did it knowing what I was doing and what was likely to happen. And you go down, and negligently is I slipped through the stop sign, I wasn't paying attention. The lowest level of intent. Beyond that, we have strict liability. Now, strict liability is a special kind of thing in the criminal law, and we don't have many strict liability offenses because what that says is if you did it, it doesn't matter what you knew, what you thought, what you intended to do, you are strictly liable. Think about a speeding ticket. You are stopped for going 52 miles an hour. You thought it was a 50-mile-an-hour zone. Cop tells you it's 35. It doesn't make any difference that you didn't intend to speed, that you didn't know that you were speeding, or even that you were reckless or negligent about it. You're just liable. and ignorance of the law is no excuse. Why is this important? Because the legislature, the General Assembly, created a strict liability offense here when it comes to illegal voting. Particularly in this case, we're talking today about non-citizens voting. If you are not a citizen of the United States, you're not only not allowed to vote, but under our law, you are strictly liable under the criminal law for the consequences if you do. So we took the first batch of 7 out of those referrals into a grand jury, and 6 of them were indicted. You all will have by now or shortly the news release that lists the names and the locations and what happened. What was common in these cases was that the individual was a lawful permanent resident. They're allowed to be here, but they're not a United States citizen and were not allowed to vote. The grand jury indicted 6 out of those 7 cases in several counties. The one case that didn't get indicted by the grand jury was a student at Oberlin who appeared to have voted in Washington State and in Ohio. The grand jury declined to indict that case. So, want to turn quickly to the question of discretion. There are people that would say that these folks didn't mean any harm and that these cases shouldn't have been brought. I would disagree with that. Voting in America is a sacred right. It is the exercise of the sovereign people in self-government. Our legislature has provided a serious penalty if a non-citizen tries to exercise the power that belongs to we the people, the citizens of this country, not just any person who happens to be here. Now, there are moments that, in cases and fact patterns that do warrant exercise of prosecutorial discretion. I'm thinking of a particular case involving a 92-year-old woman that I declined to take to a grand jury. I'm thinking of a case where we had an Alzheimer's patient living in a nursing home. No public good will be served by prosecuting cases like that. However, let the message go out twofold. One is, if you're not a citizen, it is illegal to vote, whether you thought you were allowed to or not, and you will be held accountable in the state of Ohio. But the second is, this is a very small number of cases. Voting irregularities like this are rare. They're a small number, and you should rest assured your Secretary of State flagged these cases and sent them to me. I took a look at them and I'm taking appropriate actions and enforcement. We should all be confident of the upcoming election that the laws are being enforced. They'll continue to be enforced. And I am now happy to take questions.
The first question is from Morgan Traw with WEWS.
Hi, Morgan.
Good morning, AG Yost. Thanks for doing this. So about the 6 indictments, can you tell us a little bit more about where those came from, where the people are, what areas they're located in, and if the prosecutors' offices in those areas were aware of these cases?
Yeah, all of these cases had been previously declined for prosecution. In your area, we had a man in North Royalton named Patel. We had someone in Hudson, Lorinda Miller, and we had a young man in Kent, Ohio, named Nicholas Fontaine. All 3 of them had the same fact pattern of being lawfully resident, but voting without United States citizenship.
The next question is from Nick Evans with the Ohio Capitol Journal.
Hi, Attorney General. This is Nick. Just wanted to double check. Could you run through the numbers one more time? I mean, you started I think it's 600 odd cases, 138. Could you just real quick, just quick and dirty, run through the
Sure.
total and break it down to those 6 indictments?
In August, we had 597 submitted. Of those 597 cases, 138 of them involved actual voter registration, or excuse me, actual voting. The remainder were voter registration. Of those 138, the vast majority, 121, were new referrals that had never been worked or investigated before, which meant that we were starting at ground zero. And then we had an additional 56 new cases that came in September that were part of a much larger batch that included some of the August referrals. We're not done. These 7 cases were the first tranche, if you will, of cases that we reviewed and made decisions on. So the work is continuing. There's more investigation to do, and I anticipate there will be at least some additional cases filed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dick.
The next question is from Spencer Hickey with Hannah News.
Thank you. I haven't gotten the release yet, so I might be behind on this, but what election were these votes in regard to? And could you talk about the timing we're 2 weeks out from the next one?
Okay, well, Patel voted in 14, 16, and 18. Miller, the Hudson resident, 16, 17, 18, and 19. Fontaine in Kent was 16 and 18. Ahmed Aden here in Columbus voted in 2020 as well as 2008. I don't think we would have taken the 2008 case had he not voted in 2020. Cooper here in Hilliard, 2016 and 2020. And then DeRojo, I'm not sure if I've got the name right on that, voted in 16 and 18.
The next question is from Jake Zuckerman with Cleveland.com.
Hello, AGOs. Just 2 quick questions here. For one, I'm sorry if I missed this early on, but on knowingness, did these people know that they did not have a right to be voting? Is there evidence on that point? And also, can you explain what happened with this Oberlin student? If he appeared to have voted in 2 states, why was he not indicted?
So the first question is each defendant is going to have their own view of what they were or weren't allowed to do. My point is, under the law, it doesn't matter what they thought. The General Assembly has made this what's called a strict liability offense, which means that you're guilty if you commit the thing, regardless of what you think about it. With regards to the Oberlin student, the allegation was he voted in Washington and in Ohio. We were able to prove that someone using his identity voted in both places. We were not able to prove that it was him that did that. This is a problem that exists with some of these old cases that will, I don't think, be an issue in the 2024 cycle in Ohio because the new law provides photo ID. I would add that that's my assessment of why the grand jury declined. The bottom line is we did present the case on the student from Oberlin, and it was the grand jury that declined to indict it. They may have had other reasons. I'm assessing the case in hindsight.
The next question is from Lynn Holsey with Dayton Daily News.
Maybe you're muted.
Yeah, just trying to get them muted. So all of these people were definitely they definitely were not naturalized citizens at the point when they voted. You verified that?
That they were not citizens when they voted. That's correct.
So what have they been charged with?
I'm having a hard time hearing you. You're a little garbled.
I'm sorry. Were all 6 non-citizens? I was a little unclear if there were other voter fraud things like the guy trying to vote in 2 different states.
Oh, I'm sorry. These were all, that was one that didn't get charged. The 6 that were charged are all people who are not citizens who voted in the various years I recited.
And so do you have any idea of why they were even allowed to vote?
How they were allowed to vote.
Yeah, I mean, if they weren't citizens, why would they have been registered and permitted to vote?
Well, I'll refer you to Frank LaRose and the Secretary of State on the processes that are in place. But particularly before this, the identity requirements in Ohio were fairly elastic. And we obviously had some people who were not citizens that voted. I think that will become much more difficult in the current, under current law. And I want to point out, this is a very small number of people. There are not enough of these cases, even if every single one is justified. We were talking about, let me just make sure I got the name right, number, 138 cases of actual voting. That's simply not enough that it would have changed any of those elections.
The next question is from Jim Province with the Toledo Blade.
Good morning, Attorney General. Could you tell us what the potential punishment is for a conviction on these charges? And also, was there any consideration of charging anyone else with helping them to register in the first place?
So these are felony 4s, maximum of 18 months in prison and 5-year post-release control. The fact of the matter is, I don't think any of these cases under current law would qualify under the sentencing for prison to go to prison. And this is a matter of holding them accountable for the violation of the law, but I don't anticipate prison time.
The next question is from Ken McKenty with Metals Recycling Magazine.
Hi, how you doing? You mentioned 597 referrals, and you gave some details on the 7 that went to the grand jury. Can you just give some elaboration on the other 500 that you're still working on? Some that voted improperly and some that involved improper registration. Just what kind of activities were they involved with, and how are these charges or how is the investigation created? And then the second part of that is on the registrations, how many of them involved registrations collected by Black Fork Strategies and 2nd Street?
Well, that's quite a few questions. Let me try to answer each of them. Only 138 of the 597 even involved voting. The rest of them are registration offenses. And I need to have a sit down with the Secretary of State about the value of those cases where there was no voting. I think that we ought to be focusing on the voting, and he's got some resources as well if he wants these cases pursued. I'm thinking that I don't really want to pull people off of officer-involved critical incident investigations, child rapists, murderers, to be chasing voter registration cases for past elections. That's a meeting that we need to have and talk about resources and how they're deployed. The voting cases we are going to work through, and we will bring the appropriate cases based on the investigations, most of which are not complete because they're new cases. They just came in this fall to our office. With regards to the conduct, we triaged these first and looked at the actual voting of non-citizens because that is a very clean case. The double voting cases are a separate issue, and you frequently have to prove up identity by circumstantial evidence, which requires additional investigation. Although under the law, circumstantial evidence and direct evidence are of equal weight and value. So don't believe the TV when they say it's all circumstantial case. People get convicted on circumstantial cases, and justly so. With regards to future progress, we have an additional tranche that we, again, prioritizing these for people that have voted multiple times that have been referred out to county prosecutors. We, under the law, have to give them a reasonable time to bring the case, and then if they don't, it reverts to the Attorney General's office. That group that's out there are people who voted illegally at least 10 times. So I'm highly hopeful that my colleagues, former colleagues in the prosecution bar, are going to act appropriately and bring those cases. If they don't, we're prepared to do an independent evaluation and make decisions here in the Attorney General's office. And I think I answered your series of questions.
The next question is from Natalie Fahmy with NBC4.
Good morning. So a bit of a two-part question here. First, you talked about voter laws being more solid now. Can you talk specifically, is that the directive from the Secretary of State in regards to non-citizens, or is it the voter ID laws that you think are going to be more helpful? And then second thing is, we're 2 weeks out from the election now. Do you think this is something that citizens should be worried about? Or, you know, we've had a lot of heightened rhetoric about stolen elections and voter fraud, things like that. What's your message in regards to that?
So first of all, I think it's the voter ID law that was passed by the General Assembly that's going to help on the question of identification. Every criminal case requires identification. That's why on TV, you always see the lawyer say, "And do you see the man that assaulted you in the courtroom?" And the witness says, "He's right there at the table." You have to show identity. And that's going to be easier now that Ohio requires a photo ID. With regards to the message, I think the message is exactly opposite what your question suggests. I think that what this tells Ohioans is, first of all, there's very small numbers of non-citizens who have voted. Secondly, that the Secretary of State's on the job and has detected those folks and sent them out to the appropriate authorities to be held accountable. And finally, that these indictments represent a fact, that accountability. A law that is not enforced isn't a law. This law is being enforced, and I think this should enable everybody to take a deep breath and be more confident that our elections are in fact safe and secure, and the non-citizens are not going to vote. And if they are, if that would happen, the few that slip through the cracks will be held accountable.
The next question is from Daryl Rowland with Channel 6.
Good morning, Attorney General. How are you?
Daryl, I'm fine. How about yourself?
Oh, not too bad. The stream of numbers is still confusing me just a little bit. You talked about the 138. involved allegations of improper voting. But then you talk about this 56 new cases in September. Into what category do they go?
Can't answer that for you. We're still processing all of those things, and what we have been able to do from the cases in September is we matched them up with the August submissions so that we could eliminate the duplicates. That's why we know that there's 56 additional cases, but we're working through it.
And do the 56, are those ones, I mean, can you tell yet if those are ones where reasonable or sufficient time has passed, where if there is a problem, you can go after it now, or you might have to wait?
Well, that's going to depend on whether it had previously been investigated and whether it had previously been sent to a local county prosecutor. And we've got quite a few of these cases to go through. This represents a significant uptake in our normal caseload. And I'm sorry, I just don't have an answer for you on that later submission at this point.
And when you have, again, 138 actual voting fraud allegations, 121 new referrals. Now, what do you mean by a new referral as opposed to what the other 17 were?
Meaning that they hadn't been investigated before. So the other 17, somebody had done some work already. In a few of those cases, BCI may have investigated it and it went out to a county prosecutor and was not prosecuted. And so now it's being sent to us.
But the 121 never even got investigated by a county prosecutor?
We don't have an investigation file on those cases. That's correct.
I mean, the reason I asked this is I'm just trying to clarify because there was a little back and forth when this was announced a couple months ago about county prosecutors falling down on the job, not willing to investigate. That appears not to be the case from what you found so far, does it? Or correct me if I'm wrong.
The county prosecutors are independently elected by their local constituents. They don't work for the Attorney General, and it's not my job to supervise them. In fact, I don't have the authority to supervise them. So I'm not going to be able to characterize all 88 county prosecutors as having acted one way or the other, or even individual county prosecutors who made individual determinations on individual cases. I will let Frank and the prosecutors have their discussion. My job is to provide that second opinion, that second set of eyes on the diagnosis. And like sometimes happens in the medical world, lawyers sometimes see different things when they look at the same case.
And just one more number question. I'm sorry. The 7 that were taken to grand juries, do you know if they were from the 17 or from the new referrals?
Well, you're now confusing me, so I think I know the answer, but I'll have Bethany confirm and get back to you.
All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
The next question is from Sarah Donaldson with Ohio Public Media.
Yeah, hey, good morning. I think Daryl got it on his 6th or 7th question. Attorney General, you touched on this a bit, but when these cases were referred to you, there was some back and forth between the Secretary of State's office and the Prosecuting Attorneys Association about what the Prosecuting Attorneys Association said were mostly weak cases. What role do you see county prosecutors playing in this broader scheme of very rare cases? And do you think they're doing enough to allow you to be the second eyes?
So in Ohio, all prosecution, all law enforcement is local, and that makes sense. You don't want some dude in Ohio, in Columbus, 100, 150 miles away, making decisions about the cases that come up in your county. This is a little bit different, like welfare fraud is another one. Benefit fraud. We have certain cases where the state has an enhanced interest. Obviously, voting is one of those things. State benefits are another one. And so in those cases where there is a declination by the county prosecutor, the state provides for a second opinion. Look, the prosecutors on all cases are the first line of defense for law and order in their local communities. That's the way it ought to be. I don't want to change that. And that's the way Ohio has run successfully for many, many years. Noble County and Mercer County and Cuyahoga County all look really different and have different issues and different values. Those prosecutors ought to reflect their communities. I'm happy to provide a second opinion, but that's what it is. It's a backstop for the state's enhanced interest in these cases.
The next question is the follow-up question from Lynn Holsey with Dayton Daily News.
Hey again. So when you say your grand jury indicted the 6, does that mean your staff will actually prosecute them like in Franklin County, or how does that actually play out?
So we have a small unit within the Attorney General's office called Special Prosecutions. These are career prosecutors who travel around the state and do limited prosecutions, usually when we're invited in because of a staffing shortage or because of a conflict of interest for the local prosecutor. We're the backstop there. In addition, that group handles the small number of cases like this where we have original jurisdiction, and that crew will handle these cases in the local counties where they've been indicted.
And are the 6 the only non-citizens in the 138? You said you went for the non-citizens first because that's kind of easier to figure out.
I think that's the case, but I don't know it. We'll follow up with you on it.
Yes, please. Thank you.
The next question is a follow-up question from Jake Zuckerman.
Hi, thanks for taking another. I just assuming that the facts in the indictment are correct and accurate as alleged. You're talking about people with legal status who voted. In your mind, is that something people should go to prison for? And I appreciate you said that that might not be the case going forward, but that could be the case going forward, correct?
Yeah, so the Ohio Revised Code sets out a list of criterion for how a judge is to decide sentencing, and we can provide that list to you. The way I look at it, these cases, none of them have the factors making the offense more serious and justifying a prison term, and most of the factors making it less likely for a prison term do exist. Now, obviously, there's going to be individual assessments. For example, remorse and acceptance of responsibility is one of those things. We won't know that until we get to court and hear what the defendant has to say, assuming, of course, that there's a conviction. But at a high level, absent criminal history or being part of a criminal enterprise, I don't see these as being a good use of expensive state prison beds. That being said, this is important. The right to vote is sacred. It is part of our exercise of sovereignty as a self-governing people. If you're not a citizen, you don't get a say, period. And there ought to be consequences if you act differently, if you break that law.
The next question is from Mason Fletcher with WHIO.
Hey, just a quick one here, and just kind of looking at the time. I know you had mentioned that some of these are from 2016, one as far back as 2008. My question is, knowing that these are 5+ years maybe in the past, why are they just now being indicted? Why would we just now being hearing about this, and why does that process take so long?
Well, my goodness, I got these referrals in August, and here we are in mid-October, and we have indictments. I will refer you to the Secretary of State on his choice of timing, but we acted with all appropriate speed in working these cases, sorting them out, trying to figure out what was what, which ones had been investigated already, and which ones were ready to go to grand jury.
Okay, so you received these in August. I must have missed that part then. My bad.
We have a follow-up question from Ken McKenty.
Yeah, we didn't get to answer on the Black Fork strategies. Black Fork and Second Street have been notorious in a bunch of counties. And then also, as in addition to the Black Fork and Second Street, how many cases came from Cuyahoga County of the total?
We can get you the county tally offline. I don't have a statewide tally by county in front of me or in my head. The Black Fork strategies question, there is, my understanding, the Secretary of State is looking into that as a separate thing. I don't believe that they were operating in the manner that is currently complained of in the time periods that we're looking at. So this is not about that case, and I'll refer you to the Secretary of State for status on his investigation.
Great, appreciate it.
And the last question, we're going to start and end with Morgan Trow.
Hello, I'm back. So when it comes to people who have green cards who are voting, I know a couple years ago, obviously, issue 2 in 2022, it outlawed non-citizens voting in local government elections on those. I know that there was some confusion before that because there was nothing explicitly in Ohio law. Were these voters voting before 2022 who have been confused? Has anybody cited the fact that this is a relatively new law in non-citizens being able to not vote?
Well, I disagree with the premise of your question. I don't think there's confusion, and I don't think it was unclear. It's in the Ohio Constitution that non-citizens may not vote. That's been the law for a very, very long time. The statute that made it clear that you couldn't even vote in a local election, in my view, was redundant when you read the constitutional provision. Whether it was or was not redundant is further irrelevant because these were not local elections, but they were state and federal elections in which people were voting. Bottom line, not an issue. Thank you, everyone.